Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Champions of Self podcast. My name is Ben Eden, your host, and I'm excited to welcome today our special guest, Jilly Maria. Hello, Jilly. How are you?
I am well, thank you. Thank you for having me, Ben. I'm excited to be here.
No problem. Glad to have you. Jilly, why don't we get started by you telling us a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I am a transformational catalyst, which in plain language is I am a life coach that uses a variety of spiritual modalities to help people heal emotion. And we could dig into anger, we dig into anxiety, we dig into sadness and in current events. I mean, current things like people get, as a short example, people saying that driving makes me angry, my commute makes me angry, I have anger issues. And so we dig into simple things like that and extrapolate them to heal them.
I like that. So why don't we jump right into that? Because I think you can teach us some great things specifically about those emotions. So why don't we start with anger? Tell us what anger can teach us, what we can learn from it, and then how we can move on from it.
Sure. So one of the things that when I work with clients, what have you, and even with friends and what have you, is anger is sadness's bodyguard. Sadness is guilt, grief, and shame's bodyguard. So if you think about the emotional spectrum has two parts. The first part is love-based emotions, and the second part is fear-based emotions. And we often in society focus on just feeling the love-based emotions, right? So joy, bliss, happiness, contentment, what have you. But when we go into things like anger is one of those emotions that people are afraid of. It is the pariah, in my opinion. Because people are afraid to feel anger. They're afraid of, well, I can't feel my anger because then what happens if I feel my anger? If I told you how often I have that question, and what I end up saying is, okay, but you've lived through everything to this very moment. So your survival record, your physical survival record is 100%, right?
Yep.
If we're talking about baseball, you're batting 1,000. That's awesome. So when we talk about anger is letting us know that something is out of whack. In the simplest of terms, if something quote unquote makes you angry, you've given your power over to that thing. Because reality is nothing has the power to make you anything. So if we feel like we're angry about something, it's an invitation to go within and explore that. Anger wants to teach us, hey, something's off track here and we need to fix it. Using traffic as an example, most of the time when I say to people, okay, what about traffic actually makes you angry? And most people will tell me, well, I don't have any control over other people on the highway or on the road. True. So then, okay, so that's true enough, valid. So then digging into, okay, but what about their behavior? Well, they don't use their signals, or they, go over 3 lanes of traffic without even caring what anybody else is doing. True and true. So, but how does that affect you? Well, I can't lollygag. I can't just be changing the radio station. I can't be having a conversation on my phone with my whoever. I have to be paying attention to the road for myself and others. And that makes me angry. Okay, so if we can dig further into that, it's about control. So I encourage people to, when they feel anger, dig into it. And here's the thing is, one of the things that I teach people too is distinguishing between saying, I am angry and I feel angry. Because when we identify with emotions, we want to hold on to that, right? It becomes part of who we are. As opposed to, I am a man, I am a woman, I am, pick your gender, pick your color, pick your ethnicity, pick your career. I am from Ohio. I am whatever your university alumnus might be. Those are things that are identifying markers. So if we feel emotion, I feel angry that people are rioting for what I feel like is no good reason, or I feel angry that my mom is a drug addict, or I feel angry that my dad abandoned us. Those are things we can hinge into, right? And we can say, okay, what's underneath your anger? I resent the fact that my dad wasn't there. Or I am angry that I feel, I am, okay, so go back into I feel angry that I was abandoned. I didn't matter. We lived in poverty. I didn't have other opportunities other kids had. I was bullied. So all of those things get stuck in that, what I call that little goo ball. So if you've ever had a plumbing pipe, that you've had to actually go in and sink and pull all the crap out, usually that one tiny thing at the beginning, so we get into that kernel and you keep unwrapping anger, and then you start to feel sadness, because once we get through the anger, man, I feel sad that I was left alone. I feel sad that I was bullied. I feel sad that I didn't have this opportunity. I feel sad that every other kid I know has a really good relationship with their parents, and I'm adopted and I don't even know who my parents are.
Yeah.
So being able to extrapolate into that and say, okay, if we can take out that, we can take off the layers of anger. We feel the anger. Okay. And here's the thing. Anger is most likely going to show up for people as shaking. The most likely thing you're going to happen when you start actually allowing yourself to feel anger is you're going to shake like a leaf. The first time that ever happened to me, I'll give you an example of this. So back when I first discovered fear-based emotions and learned about all of this, was around 2012, 2013-ish or so. And the person that I was mentoring with at the time said, it's just emotion. It's just energy in motion. Because people see a lot of my work and I will spell it as E-motion. Because the notion is it's just energy in motion. Right? So there is no pariah. Anger's not a pariah. Anger's, like you said at the beginning, anger's there to tell you something. Hey, something's not right. Any fear-based emotion, if we're frustrated, if we're resentful, if we're feeling guilty or ashamed about something, all of that has a message for us. So the first time that I ever felt anger, that we were doing, it was a group call. It was probably 200 or 300 of us on the call, and the speaker had picked somebody, and she was going on this whole thing about feeling angry, and she was, I'm so angry at my ex-husband, and she's going this whole on rant. So he deconstructed it and said, you feel anger towards your ex-husband. Let's talk about why. So she's got this whole story constructed about the whole thing. So he's deconstructing. And anybody, including myself, that had a story that was similar, first of all, I've got hot tears rolling down my face. But then I'm also realized I'm shaking. Like my chair is vibrating, the table's vibrating, like I am vibrating like a leaf. And he's like, if you happen to be vibrating or shaking or what have you, he's like, all of that is natural and normal. Just keep allowing yourself to feel it, because it will stop. And probably 10 or 15 minutes solid shaking, my body just finally was like, I could feel it like just rolling to a stop. And I kind of was like, oh, realized there was no tears left. And then I kind of started smiling, and then he was asking the person that he was talking to on the call, how are you feeling? And she started laughing. And when I work with clients, one of the things that we do when we go through emotion is I encourage you to feel that entire wave of emotion, because the arc of any emotion is 11 minutes. So if we're able to, and here's the thing, you might let's say you're grieving a loss. Let's say you're feeling let's say you have 20 years of anger built up in you. It's not going to be 11 minutes. It's going to take you longer to feel it. But here's the thing. If you sit there and think, okay, because you're going to feel it, and then you're going to feel all the way through it, and you're going to either be in a place of calm or you're going to be laughing. And so we're going to repeat that cycle until we're in a place of you're feeling at peace. And then a lot of times I'll have a test question, or I'll say, okay, on a scale of 0 to 10, how are you feeling? And then I'll re-ask the question as we go. And the goal is to get you between a 0 and a 3.
So I love what you're saying. It's so much valuable and detailed stuff. So what we're going to try to do is what we started with at the beginning. We've come this way. I know people on the podcast can't see my hand, so we've come a little bit of direction, then we're going to come back to where we started. So what you said about Anger and when people need to experience the emotion. First, I
Yes.
want to hear from you. What are some examples of what people generally do instead of experiencing the emotion?
Instead of experiencing emotions, we text people out of hand, we blow people's phones up, we scream at people, we get in people's faces that don't deserve it, we practice road rage, we riot, we burn stuff down that's not ours, that has nothing to do with us, we throw people's clothing on the front lawn, we put our dirty laundry out in public, we post things on Facebook that are, or Instagram, or whatever social media outlet of choice you want. We let people know that we're angry.
And all in an attempt to do what for ourselves?
Make ourselves feel better, and or one, misery loves company.
Okay.
So one, we're trying to verbally vomit and get everything out. Second thing we're trying to do is, again, misery loves company. So we're trying to get people to our side of our argument. Never minding the fact that there's 3 sides to every story. That's a different conversation. But and we're trying to get people to agree with us, right? To be like, he's a jerk and he's a this and whatever else is going on, or you are totally justified in burning his clothes or blowing up his phone or, calling people names or whatever.
And I think you mentioned at the beginning, anger has to do with a feeling of control.
Correct.
So if we are lashing out in any of those ways, it can be an attempt to feel control. But regardless, and I wanted you to share some of those examples just so people could relate and they say, oh, wow, I do that. And they hopefully people realize that is not the most healthy of ways to process that emotion, right? Because it does hurt others. And lashing out or getting misery loves company, that idea, it certainly doesn't do a long-term benefit. So then back to what you were saying of the proper way to experience an emotion like anger, what would you suggest on how to do that instead of all these other, maybe more natural, let's say, ways?
I would say that most of the ways that I talked about that are destructive in some way are societally, they're modeled. They're modeled to us. So my suggestion, I'll give you an example of real life of something that I do. Because I am as guilty of anybody as cursing in traffic. That's one of my vices. One of the things that I will do with myself is I will say out loud, okay, why are you mad? Like, what's really got you ticked off? Did you get your timing wrong? Are you going to be late for an appointment? And I will dig into, in real time, in real life, what I'm mad about. And then I will either allow myself, and I've been known to turn up the radio and turn up the volume on a song and just scream. Because it's an effective way to move energy. Again, emotion is just energy in motion. So I can move energy by either screaming. If I'm at a red light, I'll pound on my steering wheel. If I'm in a situation with somebody where, like, let's say, for example, that I'm having a conversation via, PM on Facebook, and something is frustrating me, and I will, and again, it involves unhooking and from the model behavior and thinking to myself, what exactly about this is bothering me? So I can really dig into, like, what's bothering me. Because a lot of times, and I feel like this is in probably, especially for a lot of young people, is there's a tendency to go along to get along. There's a huge tendency to, when you're, I would say probably to your mid to late 20s, I would say, there's a tendency to not be standing up with ourselves for ourselves. So the notion that I would stand by myself and just say, I'm going to be over here feeling my emotions for 5 minutes and I'll be back with you, or walking away from a potentially serious situation, detrimental situation, is less likely to happen. Because we have this need to be inclusive, especially if we've had things happen in life that have disempowered us. So in that case, one of the things that I would do is I would encourage kids to find, and when I say kids, I mean, kids can be anybody. I mean, I have friends that are my own age I call everybody kid. But the point is find somebody that you are close with, that you can share your tools with, so that you're able to say, okay, why is it bothering me? What's really going on? Like, why are you really feeling anger? And being able to come back to that center of, once we've discovered the why, we can then, and honestly, one of the simplest things to do for people is take a deep breath. Right. Honestly, just in the moment, just take a deep breath. Because a lot of times that will bring you back to center and reel you in significantly to where you can then be like, okay. Because if we're like, someone used the swimming example with me a couple years ago. They said, if you're out and you get to a point and, like lakes and oceans have drop-offs. So you're walking, and then all of a sudden, if you're walking an emotion and you're good and everything's good, and then all of a sudden you drop off, and we freak out a little bit because there's a significant drop off when we went from being, maybe knee deep to now, shoulder deep. So being able to know, okay, where did I drop off, and walking back enough to where it's like, okay, I'm safe and I feel good in knee deep water. Because water is actually emotion. So if you're actually able to be like, okay, this is where where I feel safe, then if we can train ourselves to be in that space of, I can go no further than that because I don't know how to swim.
There you go. I want to learn some more from you. So what's some more insight that you can give us on the difference between anger and frustration?
Okay, so frustration is, the best way I can describe frustration, and this is not my organic idea, is it is the difference between where you are and where you want to be. Okay. So if we're in a space of frustration, one of the things that I will do is I will catch myself if I'm really frustrated that. First of all, what's my why? So why am I frustrated? And then identifying aloud, or you can even, if you're a journaler, journal about it. If you can, type it on your phone, type it on your phone. But let's say I am in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I want to be in Boston as an example. Or I am making 6 figures and I really want to be making multiple 7 figures. Or I am watching the deterioration of whatever or whoever, and I really wish I could do something to help.
And I'll give you an example so you can apply this. What if I'm the leader of a group and my group isn't acting the way I would like them to? We're not accomplishing what I would like to as a group.
Okay, in that case, I would pull back to one, for your own self, if as the leader, what was your goal? And seeing if you can backtrack to where we got off track. Because a lot of times we can say, okay, I was, everybody came in and my goal was to, clean up the gym and paint the gym today, and I was delayed for 5 minutes and everybody kind of went and scattered, and now I can't pull them back together to get things done. So being able to pull back, getting clear on your own objective, and then, pulling the troops back in, so to speak, and then reorienting and saying, okay, who wants to do this? Who I need help with these, whatever tasks, or the goal today is X, and I'm super jazzed about helping people or delivering meals or painting this old gym or cleaning up trash, or, I'm super jazzed to dig into our emotions and find out where you guys are at and listen to and hear you. Because a lot of times if we're in a situation where someone is getting the opportunity to be seen and heard, especially in young people, that is invaluable right now. So being able to be in that position where you can work, and as a leader, you're not only are you digging in and working by their side with them, but you're also digging in and saying, so Charlotte, tell me about how things are going for you. And really, eyeball to eyeball, as you're working and connecting with that person, they are seen, they are heard, they are valued, they're going to come back to center. And then usually Charlotte's got 2 or 3 friends with her, because if you can find the leader of the pack, then you get the whole pack back.
Yeah, very well said. Good job.
Thanks.
Now, let's talk about anxiety. Tell us where that comes from, kind of what it means, how we react, how we can use proper tools to experience that emotion and have power over it.
Okay, So anxiety is one step ahead of anger. So I talked earlier about how anger is sadness's bodyguard and sadness is guilt, grief, and shame's bodyguard.
Mm-hmm.
So anxiety is actually anger's bodyguard. And a lot of times anxiety basically is, I'm afraid of something I don't have any control over.
Mm.
So if we're able to, and I've experienced anxiety myself the last couple of years, more so than I had prior. And I've kind of been in a space the last, I'll give you a real life example. Got into a car accident end of May, and I have been looking actively for new vehicles, which means going by myself and test driving. It means going to dealerships or, if someone's got a private vehicle for sale, that I have to go to uncomfortable spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And in order to try and find the right vehicle for me. So there's this notion of digging into anytime someone feels anxiety. And again, not I am anxious, I feel anxiety.
Right.
So if we can say, I feel anxiety, then my job is to say, okay, where do I feel like I'm not in control? And a lot of times for a lot of people, especially like if we are anxiety people with like social situations or afraid of disappointing people, or we're afraid of how we're going to show up, is a really common one. Is if we feel, and I say to people only half jokingly, don't worry about what you're doing or messing up because everybody else is too busy paying attention to their phone. And it's sad, but it's also true. And the point is to do what you do for yourself, because here's the thing. Everybody has a little bit of anxiety. We just call it different things.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of people, I had someone say to me a few weeks ago, they were feeling anxiety about something and they PM'd me and they said, and honestly, up till 10 minutes ago, I never would have called it anxiety. Okay. So I said, okay, what would you have called it? And they said, I would have called it anger or fear. Okay. And here's the thing. People are going to label things what they're comfortable dealing with.
Okay.
So if we're in a situation with anxiety, as an example, anxiety is usually, I'm afraid of what I'm walking into, or I'm afraid of I'm about to do next. We also, with anxiety, have a tendency to take things incredibly personally until we know not to. And one of the things that I teach people, and it's been one of those things that I've had to learn myself, and it has been a really tough lesson at times, is other people's actions toward me, their words toward me, are not about me. They are a reflection of that person's internal turmoil and issues. But that a lot of times causes us anxiety, right? Because if we're in a situation where I feel anxiety because I texted him, her 3 hours ago and I haven't heard anything.
Mm-hmm.
I am notorious, and I don't know if anybody else in your audience can speak to this, but someone's going to relate. I'm notorious for typing out a message and getting distracted by 3 or 4 of the things and not hitting the send button and then being, well, I don't understand why so-and-so hasn't, I guess it would help if I hit the send button. Yeah, guess hit the send button is kind of important if you want people to communicate with you.
Right.
But again, it's one of those things where we take a lot of things personally, and if we're able to delve into with anxiety, what I encourage people to do is if they tell me that they're feeling anxiety, I'll say, okay, so what are you trying to control? And a lot of times it's an outcome, it's someone else's response, or I'm trying not to get hurt. And that a lot of times is we're putting our happiness or our state of mind and well-being into somebody else's pocket or somebody else's hands.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of times the people that I speak with, they have this feeling of anxiety because either they're comparing themselves to their siblings and really want to match up, or they're really busy and they feel overwhelmed and they're like, well, I can't handle it all. And so there's a lot of circumstances or events or whatever that are happening. And yes, they all bring it down to that title of a feeling of anxiety. And I think what you said is very valuable to break it apart. What do we want control over? What do we have control over? How can we be more comfortable in what we know and all that kind of stuff? Anything more you want to say on that?
Well, I think too, especially when you talk about, sibling rivalries and what have you, and especially like kid dynamics, like especially right now where a lot of families have been self-quarantine together and what have you. And so the kids aren't necessarily getting the attention that they deserve. They're not necessarily getting the outside time, what have you, such and so forth. But it's important also, I think, to, and especially if there's parents that hear this, have somebody that is not emotionally attached to the situation, speaking to your children and letting them know that they are an individual and that they are if you have 5 children, you have 5 different personalities. You have 5 different sets of hopes and dreams. And you could have, let's say you have 5 girls and they're all gymnasts. You still have 5 different levels of, they might be good at 5 different apparatus. They might all be good at different things, and they all have different personalities. So it's really important to, in circumstances like that, I feel like amplify the positive. Maybe you're not the best in the balance beam, but my goodness, when you are on the floor, my eyes are glued to you. Or maybe you're not a gold medal gymnast, but you know what? Not even 1/4% of gymnasts get that high. And that is completely okay because you are having fun and you are slaying it. And we're so proud of you.
Very good. Why don't we take the last couple minutes and talk about sadness?
Oh,
I like what you're telling us about all these emotions, so let's hear what you have to say about sadness.
Sadness is, well, first of all, sadness is guilt, grief, and shame's bodyguard. Sadness is also one of those emotions that we are not, as a society, quote unquote, trained to feel. So a lot of, especially with men and boys are not modeled, do not know how to model feeling tears, feeling sadness, even grieving somebody who's passed away. There's this notion of like, okay, you've had 2 weeks time, so wrap it up. Whoa. So allowing ourselves to cry, and this notion of sadness as, sadness is one of those emotions that wants to say, hey, got some guilt, grief, and shame over here that I'd like to feel. All I want to do is feel it. And again, once we allow ourselves to feel the emotion, and not even, almost anything can cause us to feel sadness nowadays. So just allowing ourselves to be in that moment of, I feel sad that, the dog died, or I feel really sad that, if you see one of my nephews, they live on a country road, and they happened to one morning be driving somewhere, and there was a deer that had passed away. Deer car doesn't normally end in favor of the deer. And so, my nephew's in the back seat sobbing his eyes out because he's so sad that the deer's gone to heaven. But again, that's something where being able to just allow people to express their sadness and see, and again, it's always important to ask the emotion. And I do this out loud, no shame in my game, to say, okay, I feel sadness. Sadness, what do you want me to know? What do you need me to know? And sometimes it's as simple as, it's okay to feel me. It's totally okay to feel that emotion, because a lot of times it gets stacked up. So you might be feeling tears, like you might be reading an article on Facebook where something bad happened to somebody and you've got tears streaming down your face. You don't know that person, Adam's house cat, what have you. But being able to just allow yourself to feel that emotion so it doesn't stack up. And here's the thing too that's really important with sadness is it doesn't matter why you feel it, like what, and I'm not saying that to negate it as much as we a lot of times feel like if I'm feeling sadness, there has to be a reason why. Like if someone hasn't passed away recently or something bad hasn't happened to you, how dare you feel sadness? And that's something that I feel like we have to reconstruct and remodel to a place of, I feel sadness. Okay, cool. Tell me all about your sadness. And I would honestly sit down. If someone said that to me, I would say, okay, talk to me about that. Tell me about why you're feeling sadness. Well, I don't know. Okay, so what brought on the sadness? I would want to tease that out and tease that out and tease that out, because probably guilt, grief, and shame somewhere in there is going to come up. And then you burst that open. It's probably 10 or 15 minutes of, feeling emotion, crying, what have you. And then there's going to be that joy ball, that place where they're either laughing, giggling, smiling, feeling relief that they just were able to let that go.
Very good. So a couple things on that. With the sadness, you're exactly right that sometimes people don't feel the sadness because they say, well, according to how life is supposed to work, I don't have a good enough reason to feel sad. Or they compare themselves to others and say, well, they don't look sad, so I shouldn't be sad. Even if the same event happened to both of them. Oh, it's been 2 weeks and they're already over it. When maybe they're not, and they're just, living life and covering it. Anyway, lots of thoughts that come to it that, like you're saying, our society just hasn't really trained everybody to deal with that sadness. I love what you say about it is what did you say? It hides, right? The guilt, grief, and shame. Yes. I think that's valuable to understand. Question that came to my mind. I mean, you understand these very well. You explain them extremely well. So I appreciate that from you. How, and we'll get to how people can connect with you in a second, but where have you learned some of this?
I have learned a lot of it came from Panache Desai. He had a book called Discovering Your Soul Secret. And he broke down rage, he broke down anger, he broke down sadness, he broke down grief and shame, and it was really interesting, and guilt. So it was interesting to have like the book is broken down to 33 days, and it's morning, noon, and night, and it was interesting to have the different constructs and different exercises around each emotion. So they were really broken down in order to, again, extrapolation and being able to be, okay, rage is compacted anger, and we're so, if we can just make friends with our emotion. I mean, that was basically the whole thing, was making friends with each emotion and realizing it's just energy and motion. And I've kind of had a couple other mentors and a couple other teachers along the way. And then I've just kind of built on my own personal experiences with feeling various emotions, and being able to put those things that I've learned in a book into practice, and being able to say, okay, if I, feel rage, or I feel anger, or I feel sadness, allowing myself to feel those emotions so that I can let them go. Because when we let an emotion go, we also collapse the stories that we're attached to, and it lifts us out of victimhood.
Ooh, I like that. Very nice. Well, goodness. Well, this has been some good stuff. I almost don't want to end it, but how can people get a hold of you on social media if they'd like to connect and learn more?
Okay. I am on Facebook at Jilly Maria Transformational Coach. Transformational Cows, actually. Jilly Maria. When you type in at Jilly Maria, all one word, it'll bring up the rest of it for you.
Okay.
They can also find me. My group is Awakening with Grace, and they can also find me on Instagram at Fire and Ice TL Coaching.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining today. We've learned some valuable stuff. Everybody, thank you for joining another episode of the Champions of Self podcast, and we'll talk to you next time.